When you think about super successful businesses that are selling through the roof like Heinz or Mattel, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But there's a secret. The business behind the business making selling simple for them and buying simple for their customers. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout as Heinz and Mattel. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/promo.
Yeah, sure thing.
Hey, you sold that car yet?
Yeah, sold it to Carvana.
Oh, I thought you were selling to that guy.
The guy who wanted to pay me in foreign currency, no interest, over 36 months? Yeah, no. Carvana gave me an offer in minutes, picked it up, and paid me on the spot. It was so convenient.
Just like that.
Yeah?
No hassle.
None.
That is super convenient.
Sell your car to Carvana and swap hassle for convenience. Pickup fees may apply.
Wow. What's up?
I just bought and financed a car through Carvana in minutes.
You? The person who agonized 4 weeks over whether to paint your walls eggshell or off-white bought and financed a car in minutes?
They made it easy. Transparent terms, customizable down and monthly. Didn't even have to do any paperwork.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Hey, have you checked out that spreadsheet I sent you for our dinner options?
Finance your car with Carvana and experience total control. Financing subject to credit approval.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, if you don't mind, I should be saying Liverpool University's national treasure, Kieran Maguire, as per the message I said I wouldn't mention.
Thank you.
How you thought you'd get away with that, as the estimable Julian Chenery, our live producer, also got the message from a nice chap in Texas, I believe, where they're prone to slight over-exaggeration, who said that we all had to wrap Kieran Maguire in cotton wool. You guys over there, he's a national treasure. So Kieran's plaintive message saying, we don't have to mention this, do we? So, no, we don't have to mention it. There's no obligation to mention it legally, but of course it's going to get mentioned. We'll forget. We'll call you Tresh for a couple of pods, and then after that it'll. And also, Kieran, let's face it, we didn't get the nightmare quarter-final draw that we were both hoping to avoid.
We didn't. It's true.
There is also, I don't know why, from two sets of football fans who are normally, well, Palace fans, certainly quite pessimistic, suddenly deciding we're definitely getting to the final and it'll be Brighton we're playing. So let's deal with Fulham and possibly Man City first before we worry about that. Yeah, so Palace fans. Yeah, of course, Brighton got a home draw. Typical of media love them. So, yeah, doesn't quite work out like that, does it? There you are. I can't even remember who you. Oh, yes, you played. You had a very good result at Newcastle yesterday.
It was. I didn't go because it was £210 on the train.
Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, Sunday after. There was only one train out of Brighton that was going.
Yeah,
and I hadn't seen the Baroness for about 5 or 6 days because, as you know, she's looking after our grandkids, and I'm up in Liverpool and here, there, and everywhere. So I said, right, now we'll go out for a meal. We won't worry about the football. I'm going to be an adult about it. And so we went for this fantastic meal, absolutely fantastic meal, and wasn't looking at my phone. And then she says, "I'll pick up the phone for you." Pick the phone. Oh, you're losing, and that was fine. That was that's a lot easier to deal with than if you're winning.
Yeah,
and then. She looked at the phone again, and I was trying to be the adult in the room. And she said, they've equalised. I said, okay. And then we finished the meal, and we were driving back home from the station. And Newcastle scored. Lamptey got sent off.
Yeah.
Newcastle scored from the free kick. And she said, that's it. Right, I'm turning off the radio now. So we got home, and I thought we'd been knocked out of the FA Cup. So I went off to go and do some work on the bicycle. And then she shouted at me, "It's 1-1." I'm going, "How can it be 1-1? We'd lost." And Newcastle had scored. So it was very bizarre around. Yeah, so it was very good. I just want to say that lots of my friends have been in contact to say how great the Newcastle fans were at the end of the game. They were, they came along, chatted, shook your hand, and wish you all the best. And it does restore faith, things like that in football. When Chelsea fans were exactly the opposite in the previous round.
It does. Well, Newcastle fans have got a little trip to Wembley as a consolation in 2 weeks anyway. So, but yeah, of course, something like that. I have to say, as a Palace fan, I was getting slightly annoyed watching it, because if they mentioned once that the Brighton fans were getting a free pie and a pint from Brighton for travelling up, then they mentioned it 10 times, to the extent that Ali's asking me, why are you shouting, he's a billionaire, at the TV? He can afford a free pie and a pint for the tour. He's a billionaire! And Ali's answer to everything, well, why don't you mention it on the pod? I may do that, Ali. It's questions day today, Kieran. We've got some cracking questions as ever. And the first comes from Tony Giles. Now, this is one we did sort of discuss when it first happened, but we haven't really looked at it in any detail, certainly from a financial point of view. But Tony's question is this. Watching Man City recently, it struck me just how large the advertising hoardings are at the Etihad. Does the Premier League have a rule on the size of advertising screens? I know there's a handbook, which I'm sure would have the answer, but listening to the happiness Kieran gets from thumbing through the rules, who am I to stop a man from pursuing his guilty pleasure? Oh, he loves a guilty thumbing. Kieran loves a guilty thumbing. I haven't been to the Etihad for a couple of years, Kieran, so I don't know whether those advertising hoardings are that size only on the opposite side of the main cameras, or whether they're that side on both sides of the ground. But they are noticeably bigger, and presumably some seats would have had to be taken out to avoid people not being able to see through them.
That's right. If you take a look at the Premier League handbook, there is a limit on the size of shirt advertising as far as your front of shirt deal is concerned. I think it was also noticeable yesterday that there are slightly different rules in the FA Cup. So you may have seen Manchester United on the back of their shirts advertising Microsoft Copilot. And we've seen in other sports, and especially sports such as rugby league, where there's been an expansion as to the number of logos. So Premier League presently is limited to front of shirt and sleeve, or one sleeve, because the Premier League logo goes on the other. Whether that will be extended, especially with the removal of gambling adverts from front of shirt deals starting in 26-27, we will have to wait to find out. But as far as the advertising hoardings are concerned, that's down to the club. So Manchester City, I believe it is only on the side where the cameras are, because what's the point of having it elsewhere? There's no financial benefit when you are focusing on trying to get your brand across to a televisual audience in 190 different countries around the world. So Manchester City have done their sums. They are expanding the Etihad, so by the looks of it, it's going up to over 60,000 seats in due course. And they realised that it was actually more lucrative, given the number of people who are watching live TV, to remove a few seats and on the back of that sell it. And it's also because it's that digital advertising, you're actually selling 30-second slots. And for a club that's been as successful as Manchester City, they're very, very popular, and therefore they can command high prices.
It's interesting, Kieran, isn't it? You go to Selhurst Park, you go to most grounds in the Premier League Championship, and whereas 30, 40 years ago, you had posters, look them up, kids, you had posters for car hire centres in Purley or the Ben Sherman shop in Croydon. And now, for the most part, you don't recognise 90% of the companies that are advertising, because they're clearly not UK brands. A lot of these are, as you say, international brands. I think that the Tottenham Man City midweek game, it seemed that AIG, most of the hoardings were AIG congratulating various top office managers from around the world and top salesmen from around the world, which obviously AIG are Tottenham sponsor. But it's like, I find it slightly distracting, I have to say, trying to work out which brand is being advertised and which country it's aimed at. But clearly, they're making a lot of money.
They are, yes. And how long is it before we move to a Similar position to that we've seen in cricket and other sports, where there is on-pitch advertising on the grass itself. Having said that, we both know a groundsman or two, and can you imagine their reaction if some sticky beak accountant suggests that that's a good idea?
Yeah, you can imagine a world where Jean-Philippe Mateta is laid out in agony on the pitch, and the first people to reach him are the brand managers because he's lying on top of the advert. It's like drag him off the advert before the ambulance people get to him. Martin Toll has our next question. Now, this is one we have talked about before, Kieran, but it's one that has exercised fans for probably as long as there's been turnstiles, to be honest. And I think it's always worth revisiting things that our fans get agitated about. Our fans, football fans, as well as our fans, Kieran. Our fans don't get agitated today. Occasionally, if we go a bit too long and the dog walk gets extended by 5 minutes, maybe our fans get agitated. A lot of dogs being walked. Amazing. I've said this before, Kieran, at live gigs. It's amazing how many people tell us they listen in the gym. You look out across our live audiences, you don't see many gym bunnies looking back at us, I have to say. As indeed, to be fair, they don't see many gym bunnies on stage looking back at them.
That's true.
So Martin Toll says, you've probably answered this before, but if not, could you confirm if EFL attendance figures include all season ticket holders and other allocated or sold tickets rather than people who literally click through the turnstiles? I was at a game on Saturday and the ground didn't look like it had the reported attendance. I think you can add Premier League in there as well, Kieran. We've all been to games this season where they're supposed to be a sellout, but you can see plenty of not just empty seats, but empty blocks. And again, and this is the second time I'm going to say this, it does tend to be, you don't see empty seats on the stand opposite the cameras. They tend to be underneath the cameras. So most grounds look like they're sold out on TV, but even in the Palace Millwall game on Saturday, which was technically a sellout, there's still odd little blocks of seats here and there where it'd be a coincidence if a whole square of seats didn't turn up for some reason. So you think, well, they haven't been sold for whatever reason, but yes, they had proudly advertised it as a sellout, and for the most part it was. But Fulham 2 weeks ago sold out, but certainly that main stand had huge gaps.
Absolutely. Well, I'm afraid the sad news is what is quoted in the media is the pretendance. It is the number of tickets sold. And I'm hugely indebted to a gentleman. I won't name him, for don't want to embarrass him, but a West Ham fan did a freedom of information request to Newham Council, and he looked at the period from August 2023 to January 2025, when the official attendance of all of the West Ham matches was 2,071,000 people. But that overstated the actual attendance by over 300,000.
Wow.
So it is tickets sold that matter. And the difference between tickets sold and actual people attending varied, but in one match it was 19,700 less than the quoted attendance of 62,000. Effectively, a third of people didn't turn up. And that could have been, it was a December match. I suspect it was one of those matches which was taking place midweek, difficult to get to, and so on. And it's live on television, and you can see why people have made that decision. But I do think in a time when accuracy and transparency are characteristics which are missing in so many broader aspects of life, it would be good if we had a little bit more acknowledgement of the truth. So I think that is indicative of it being an issue. I certainly was aware. I used to subscribe many years ago to a Manchester United fanzine called Red Issue. And it was, I think it was what you might call old school, pithily written, very aggressive at times. But even so, the passion for the club shone through. And I think they'd done something similar for freedom of information. And even for a club with the stature of Manchester United, the number of actual clicks through the turnstiles compared to the official attendance, there was a noticeable difference. And it was more noticeable for those midweek matches or a 12:30 kickoff on a Saturday and so on. But it is these figures are quite revealing. And I say, the person that sent me information was very decent of them. But that, and I couldn't get to the Brighton-Bournemouth match last Tuesday because I was teaching up in Liverpool. The Baroness went, and she said the 6 seats around her were empty. I think it's a challenge for clubs. It's a challenge when matches are on television. It's a challenge when there are transportation issues. Kids have got school the following day. I'm not denying any of that, but I think it's still an issue as far as clubs are concerned, because every empty seat is a slight reduction in the atmosphere. Every empty seat is a slight reduction in your level of catering sales and merchandise sales for that match as well.
I have to say, Kieran, to borrow a phrase from a friend of mine who's been working with some West Ham fans recently on some legal issues, West Ham fans are being splendidly bolshy at the moment. They really are doing a very good job of calling their club owners to account. And I think I can guess the answer to this question, Kieran, because clubs will always say, well, some season ticket holders don't turn up. So the figure does reflect the amount of tickets actually sold.
Yeah.
But why would, when it's clear that it's more than season ticket holders not turning up, and of course we know that some clubs are warning season ticket holders who turn up, who don't turn up more than 2 or 3 times that they might lose a ticket. Why would clubs hide the fact that the game's not sold out?
Well, first of all, one of the things they are trying to do all the time is to sign commercial deals with sponsors, with partners. And if I was West Ham, I would want to be able to go and say, we've got 62,000 people. We've got 62,000 tickets sold for every one of our match at home. Come along and advertise your products here, become our official cheese partner or our official tyre partner or our official financial services partner. You've got 60,000 sets of eyes looking at your product, linking you to West Ham United or whatever the club happens to be. So commercially, it does make sense, and I can see the logic of that. I think from a practical point of view, there are some clubs for whom it's more of a problem than others. And I wouldn't necessarily include West Ham necessarily in that category. West Ham's a fantastic old school club, but at the same time, they're not a tourist attraction. And this is not denigrating. I know how expensive hotels are in Manchester and Liverpool when Manchester United and Liverpool are at home. And that's testament to their global appeal as brands. So those clubs, especially these days, are very, very good at shifting tickets. And we are seeing pressure from clubs along the lines of, if you cannot attend, put your ticket into the recycling scheme and we will sell them on your behalf. You get 1/19 of your season ticket price back. And again, for want of a phrase, the bigger clubs are able to go and sell those tickets at far more lucrative prices. So the club wins, the atmosphere wins, the fan who's able to attend wins, and the fan who isn't able to attend wins as well. So it is sort of a two-tier approach, because some clubs find it that much easier to achieve than others. But I think this does reflect the fact that there's so many people buying season tickets and missing out on a few matches. Why isn't there an investigation? Why doesn't the Premier League say that there's a bit of an issue here? We really should be trying to look at this a little bit more carefully. And again, this isn't, I'm not criticising the Premier League here, but effectively, what we are told when we sign our season ticket, when we buy our season ticket in advance for a weekend match, when you're playing at home, what we're effectively expecting you to do is to set aside Friday night, Saturday lunchtime, Saturday 3:00, Saturday 5:30, now Saturday 8:00, Sunday lunchtime and Sunday 4:30, and then Monday night as well. They expect you to set aside 4 days without complaint, without grumble, a lot of the time. And to be fair, the ticket recycling schemes are there to try to alleviate some of that, but it simply doesn't work. Some matches simply just don't appeal to the clubs with the smaller fan bases.
It's not just days either, it's times. I mean, the Palace Villa game last week was a 7:30 kickoff, and despite the club reminding people of this for about 10 days beforehand, it still came as a surprise. There were still WhatsApp groups on the Tuesday game. What, 7:30? Because if you think about it logically, when a large percentage of your fans are young men, and for a London club, a lot of those young men will be working in the West End or in the city, young women as well. That extra half hour, because normally our midweek games kick off at 8 o'clock or at the earliest 7:45. So that extra half hour, you've got to leave work earlier to get to the game in time to, and it was quite clear on Tuesday that even halfway through the first half, people were still streaming in. Yeah. And they had plenty of notice of it, but it still has an effect. The trouble at West Ham, as a mate of mine says, who's a season ticket holder, and I'd need to talk to I presume there are colour scientists out there, but those white seats really show up the fact that no one's sitting on them.
Yeah.
For some reason, it really stands out when people. It's like when West Ham weren't doing particularly well, and West Ham fans are leaving early for their half-time pint. You really do notice it.
And if the Premier League, as a product, wants to advertise its wares, having large swathes of empty seats around, and I appreciate, when you buy a season ticket, you buy it in good faith, but if it is empty, it doesn't. It's not good for the optics. We've got this globally successful product, and all these empty seats. It's very noticeable when I watch EFL matches. There are. In the Championship, you will see large blocks unoccupied. At the same time, you've got a club like Leeds United, which has magnificent support. They're doing superbly well this season, and it's a scramble to get a ticket for Ellen Road. So it does vary, but there are some grounds which are 2/3 full, and it has an impact upon the atmosphere. And I think it has an impact also on the TV viewer.
This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV. It's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Alex Nunn as our next question. Alex says, us Mansfield Town fans think our owner, John Radford, is the best chairman in the Football League. And with not hearing Mansfield on the podcast, I assume we're doing something right. So I was wondering if you could mention us and how we're being run and maybe the numbers behind the current progression the club is making. It's always nice for you, Kieran, to do a good old-fashioned one-club question, especially when it seems like it might be a nice answer to give for once.
Yes, it is. In the most recent set of accounts, Mansfield Town broke even. I think John Ratford has done a really horrible word to use, sensible job. He sets an appropriate budget. Having said that, over the years, Mansfield have lost over 6 million, but in recent years, he and I think his wife's involved at the club as well. They have run it on an even keel. And then it's a case, I think, of engagement with the fans. We know our good friend Andy Holt. I've got a lot of time for Andy. He's a combative individual. And if the fans are moaning, he'll say, right, I'll meet up with you in the bar after the match and I'll explain exactly what I'm doing. And I do think that the clubs that go through that route, because there's a lot of fans who I think misconstrue what sustainable means.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fans who think that a £105 million limit for losses over 3 years in the Premier League, for example, should be a £105 million target. And that's not sustainable in any traditional business method. Although I increasingly coming to the view that football is not a sustainable game and it's not a business as such. It's a vanity exercise for so many people. But Mansfield, on relatively low revenues, they are run extremely efficiently. As I say, I think this is possibly the first time we've mentioned them. In the most recent season, they still managed to spend £200,000 plus on recruiting new players. So that's indicative of that's a decent player investment by lower league standards, I can assure you. I appreciate that they can't match the likes of Birmingham and Wrexham, but they're in a completely different position. So hats off to them and well done.
Cracking kit as well. Talking of FFP, Kieran, as we sort of slightly were, we normally are, it was noticeable yesterday watching your game on TV. So the player you got who gave the penalty away and scored,
Minte,
came from Newcastle, didn't he?
Yes, and he was, for want of a better phrase, a forced sale, which was driven by PSR. Newcastle had signed him for £7 million, immediately put him out on loan to the Netherlands. I think he was at Eindhoven or somewhere like that. Can't remember the exact club. He had a very good season. And like many clubs who'd spotted a young, talented player, they wanted to give him first-team experience without necessarily first-team experience in the Premier League. So the Eredivisie is a high standard of football. In an ideal world, they would have wanted to have kept him. If had there not been PSR pressures, they would have kept him, and they might have kept some other players as well. But this is where unintended consequences of PSR, there's no way that the Premier League, as far as the executives of the Premier League would have wanted this. Could be argued that some of the bigger clubs always had this at the back of their mind because they don't want challenger clubs such as Newcastle and Aston Villa and Forest to be not threatening for trophies, but threatening to take away Champions League places because the Champions League is so lucrative. So Brighton signed Minte just before the 30th of June, and he's quick, and he's young. He'll make the occasional mistake, as we saw for the penalty. But he's a very exciting raw talent, and I can understand and have sympathy towards the Newcastle fans who feel that they've still got a budget which is a fraction of that of the leaders at the top of the Premier League, and they're being forced by a set of rules which don't really make a lot of sense to prevent them from being able to compete.
Well, see, it's that word forced that I took exception to with the commentary yesterday, because again, I think Sam Matterface is a very good commentator, and Ali McCoist, who's always good value. But they must have, the commentator must have been used a phrase again that forced to sell Minte because of PSR rules. And it's like, there's a great deal else going on with the PSR rules before you're forced to sell a player. It's not as though somebody at the Premier League is going, you've got to sell him because you're in trouble. It's because you haven't been as efficient as you could have been elsewhere is the problem. Then you suddenly go, we need to offload a player here. So yeah. I took exception with that idea that because again, it's the Premier League. A lot of people are going into this narrative that FFP is bad for football, full stop. In the same way that regulator is bad for football, full stop. And it's not in itself bad for football, but it is if you try and get around it and get caught.
Yes, I think the issue at Newcastle United was that they probably budgeted to finish a wee bit higher in the Premier League last season because they'd done spectacularly well in 22-23. They'd probably budgeted to do slightly better in the Champions League, and that's a very, very lucrative competition. And the combination of that, and at the start of the season, how do you go about setting a budget where every additional place in the Premier League is worth £3 million, where getting into the last 16 of the Champions League is probably worth somewhere in the region of 15 to 20 million pounds and so on. And you don't achieve your goals. So that's why I am sympathetic. I'm broadly in favour of having some set of controls, but it's striking a balance between financial prudence and competitive balance. And I think the rules in their present form are geared towards protectionism rather than trying to make the top end of the Premier League more competitive.
Okay. In which case, why aren't the top 6 clubs more... Oh, yeah, you've answered your own question, competitive. Alex Brown has our next question, Kieran, and this is an interesting one. And Alex Brown's question is about different types of income that clubs generate and what percentage that equates to in terms of annual turnover. And then Alex says, if I can be more specific, I'm a Glasgow Rangers fan. We have Edmiston House shop and restaurant, Ibrox Museum, stadium tours, etc. I wanted to know if that actually makes a big difference to the club and similar with other clubs, or is it just a bit of extra pocket money? And I suppose the answer or the question on top of that, Kieran, is where that money lies when you're calculating PSR.
Well, if you take a look at Edmiston House, the Ibrox Museum, and all of these additional elements, those are classified as commercial income. And therefore, that goes into the cost control system. Now, the cost control rules in Scotland are pretty relaxed, to put it mildly. But Rangers see themselves as competing in Europe on an annual basis. Europa League, Champions League, Europa Conference, whatever it's going to be. And therefore, they are subject to the rules which are set by UEFA. As we are starting to acclimatise ourselves, I think this year you're allowed to spend 80% of your revenue, including that commercial revenue, on player wages, amortisation, agents' fees and impairments. And therefore, for every £100 that Rangers are generating, they can spend 80 on player costs. So if it's an extra £1 million, that's an extra 800,000. So that's a player's wages for one season. That's a sort of, I'd say, Rangers, they've got a lot of players on more than 20 grand a week, I suspect, but they've got a fair number of the squad are on a wee bit less. So if that means that they can recruit one more player for each £1 million of additional revenue, then you can see the benefits of trying to broaden the revenue base without being rude to Rangers fans. Well, not Rangers fans, but Rangers, the club. You've got to be honest, the club it's behind Celtic both on and off the pitch, and therefore trying to convert... I don't like using the word campus, but I can't think of a better word. Converting the Ibrox footprint in terms of what it's got to offer in terms of facilities into more of a 365-day income generating piece of real estate compared to the 25 to 30 that you get from home games is absolutely essential. Both Rangers and Celtic do spectacularly well in terms of match day income as a proportion of total income. And again, that's testament to the fan bases of both of those clubs. But commercial income, I think, is increasingly important because you can't expand Ibrox easily, and it's an expensive exercise. It's the same with Celtic Park. The TV revenues are set externally. So boosting commercial income, I think, is the one area where management can make a difference in terms of the day-to-day revenues of the club.
And to answer Alex's question, just to clarify, I know it's not a technical accounting term, but the money made by the museum, the restaurant, etc., would that go down as pocket money?
I think it's a bit more than pocket money over the course of a season. If £1 million to you, Alex, is pocket money, I'd like to have a dad. I had to work really hard for my pocket money when I was a kid, and mine was measured in 20 pences, I can assure you.
I was hoping you would say I had to work really hard for my £1 million when I was
well, Uncle Terry, as his assistant, he was collecting serious notes. I'll say no more than that.
Yeah, he'd have to be quite generous. So he's just bunged the boy £1 million for keeping quiet.
Yeah.
And just asking for a friend, Kieran, can impairments just remind me what they are?
Impairment is where the book value of the player is greater than the market value. So you might have signed a player and it's not worked out. So if we take a look at Chelsea in, I think it was 2021, 2022, they wrote down player values by around about £70 million. Now, we don't know the name of the players, but I think it's strongly suspected that one of them was Romelu Lukaku. It didn't work out for Romelu. Romelu Lukaku is a brilliant player. I think Kepa, the goalkeeper, he was a record goalkeeping signing at the time. He didn't have the greatest of times. So it's where you say we've signed a player for 100 million, even after we've amortised them, the market value is substantially less than the figure we've got in the account. So we're going to write them down to that value.
Our next question is a very interesting one, Kieran, but we do have 3 more questions after it that are quite chunky. So if there is because I think there's either a very quick answer to this question or an answer that's so long we might have to do it on a separate pod. Because Gareth Williams says, do you know of any players not joining a club because of the owners, or could you see this happening?
I think this is a fascinating question. Best discussed after a few flaming sambucas at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah, or indeed, at one of our live gigs, maybe, yeah.
The truth is, Gareth, I'm not aware as such, but that's because if it has happened, I suspect it's been kept quiet.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about, owners? Could it be owners' religious beliefs? Could it be the owners' political beliefs? Could it be the owner's nationality? Possibly. I've met a few players. You've met far more over the years than I have. And I've always, my observation has been that they're a fairly accommodating bunch. They are there to play football. They don't really want to get involved sort of in the politics of an individual club, because they acknowledge that on many occasions theirs is a very transient career. And you are moving from club to club. So even if you don't like the owner, then you might only be at the club for 6 to 12 months. And I think they're also concerned about reputational issues in terms of their own reputation. If they get if the perception within football that they are awkward, then that could have an impact upon their ability to find employment further down their career. So are there fallouts between owners and players? Absolutely. We both know some real tearaway stories which we can't put on air. But would that stop a player going to work for a club with a particular owner? I think it would only be the case if the club was in financial straits.
Yeah.
And therefore you might say, well, I'm not going to join that club because the owner's an arse. He's not been paying wages. And, for a few months in the last year or two. So why put myself in that position? It's a bit like to a certain extent the Tarek Lamptey sending off yesterday. Don't give the referee a decision to make. And so similarly, don't join a club where you might not be getting your wages in 2 or 3 months' time based on the club's recent history.
I think also we know, Kieran, for the most part, agents will say, don't worry about the owner. You'll only meet him once. You have to shake his hand for the photograph and stand there looking embarrassed with a scarf around your neck while he stands there with his thumbs up, and that'll be it. But I'm afraid the answer to your question, Gareth, is yes, we do, but we can't tell you. It's probably the real answer, I'm afraid. However, if you're in the Rotherham area, then possibly at the end of the night, who knows? One of us might have had a couple of drinks. Who knows? Rohit Bal, that's our next question. Rohit is a Chelsea supporter and a long-term listener of the pod from Melbourne, Australia. I'm amazed he's still listening, Kieran, after the kicking you've been giving Chelsea and their glorious fans recently. Rohit says, looking at the current state of Chelsea, thank you for being a long-term listener, by the way, Rohit, it's very kind of you. Looking at the current state of Chelsea under Clearlake Capital, I wanted to know which owner has been the most successful in football history when comparing the amount of money spent and trophies won. Have you ever done an analysis of the amount of money spent winning per trophy in the Premier League era or something similar? Of course you have, haven't you? I imagine. back of a fag packet, probably, that sort of thing. It's sort of the doodle you do on the train on the way home from a restaurant with the Baroness, isn't it?
Well, I hadn't done Rohit until this weekend. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
That's why you didn't go to Newcastle.
And actually, it gave me a lot of food for thought, because the money spent winning per trophy. And then you have to say, well, hold on, Carabao Cup's not the same, is it, as the Champions League? So I then went through this really soul-searching set of tweaks and adjustments and so on. And I ended up, I think, giving, if you win the Champions League, I was giving the team 5 points, because that is setting an amazing standard. If you won the Premier League, it was 3 points. FA Cup, 2 points. League Cup, 1 point. And I said, well, hold on. We've got to acknowledge that it's a fair play to say that getting into the top 4 is an achievement. So so I gave 1 point. And then I was giving points also, 2 points for the UEFA Cup and 1 point. And I'm not saying that my point allocation is correct. Yeah, but I did spend a long time on this, and the most successful club by far, because it got the most Kieran points, was Manchester United.
Oh,
it worked out. It worked out as a wage cost of less than £60 million per trophy. The club finishing bottom, but only in the sense that at least it has won a trophy. Because neither of us can, so neither of our clubs have won a trophy. The side that came bottom was West Ham, because it's cost West Ham £1.8 billion per trophy during the Premier League era. So yes, it was Manchester United first, followed by Arsenal, followed by Chelsea, followed by Liverpool, who were just ahead of Blackburn Rovers, who came in fifth. So,
oh, wow.
Blackburn Rovers, yeah. And these are the intriguing things that you forget about. I forgot that Blackburn Rovers won the League Cup one year. I forgot that they got top 4 and therefore got into Europe on 2 occasions, as well as winning the Premier League. So, yeah, I'd just like to say thank you, Rohit, because I had an absolute whale of a time. It's one of those, and my poor wife, who I'd woken up because I'm a man of a certain age, and all of our listeners of a certain age will know that nighttime trips to the toilets are a bit more frequent than they used to, and I just come back and I thought, hold on, I need to add in the top 4 positions, because that really is a trophy. So I ran downstairs, got up, brought up my laptop. This was at 3:00 in the morning, and was busy updating it. And poor old Baroness wake up. What? Yeah, because the light of my screen is coming out. She said, "What are you watching?" I said, "Okay, it's just I'm just updating my spreadsheet." And that, you know, the look when the person that you love most of all in the world, they just give you that sighing look.
Oh God!
Yeah, it's not even disapproval. Yeah, if I've been watching, something else on a screen at 3:00 in the morning, she could look at me and just go, "Yeah." It was a bit like Frank Spencer's wife Betty, rather than it's disappointment rather than anger.
Yeah, loving disappointment, but still
loving disappointment.
Yeah,
there's that as well, but that's another story for.
Yeah, well, we've been married happily for so long that her body doesn't need to do the full range of expressions now, and I recognise the shortcuts. I know where that eyebrow's going. No need to. You can keep it there, darling. I know exactly where that eyebrow's going. Also, I'm not entirely sure what the time difference is between Melbourne and us at the moment. Probably 10 hours, let's say. I just wonder if Rohit, if he works in an office around 5:00 in the afternoon, was just getting ready to maybe go home, go to one of those lovely Melbourne bars and coffee shops you read about, and wouldn't occur to him that on the other side of the world, that was 3:00 in the morning and Kieran was going to the toilet answering his question. Well, what a wonderful world we live in.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Every cup of Nespresso coffee is an invitation to transform your morning routine into a ritual you can treasure each and every day. Using the Virtuo Pop, a simple touch of the button freshly brews bold aromas and a rich, velvety crema layer for delicious cafe-quality coffee at home. Whether you enjoy your coffee hot or over ice, every sip, every morning is unforgettable. Nothing tastes like Nespresso coffee. Visit Nespresso.com or our app to explore our full range of easy-to-use machines and coffees not found anywhere else.
Our penultimate question. We got our last two questions are both quite take a bit of answering from you, Kieran. And the first one from Matthew Hall, and again it involves Chelsea. Matthew Hall says, is it fair to say that while Chelsea may think they've activated a cheat code in amortisation that doesn't seem to be working very well, adds Matthew, the cumulative effects are going to mount up during future transfer windows to the point where they will be completely hobbled from a PSR perspective? Because while it's sustainable in the short term, surely they are slowly weighing themselves down with more and more transfer fee instalments and salaries that they will struggle to get off their books, i.e. players they can't sell, because the contracts are so long, with the added downside that they can't realise the value of the asset. It's a good question, Kieran, and it's one of those things that football fans, whilst they understand that Chelsea are doing nothing wrong, it does somehow seem that in the long term, it's not necessarily the right answer.
Yes, I mean, there's a really good article in the Financial Times. I think it was this weekend, or it was on Friday, by John Byrne Murdoch, who's a brilliant statistician. And he was looking at
Johnny. We call him,
Johnny Boy,
Johnny Boy, Johnny.
And he was looking at the decline of Manchester United through a not dissimilar set of metrics.
Yeah,
I actually have a lot of sympathy for Chelsea here, because as far as I'm concerned, what they decided to do...
I'm going to ask you to say that again. Sorry, Kieran.
I've got a lot of sympathy for Chelsea here, and I personally think they've done nothing wrong. Right. And I seem to be in a minority. They've taken a gamble that they have recruited a set of players who are going to be A, young, and B, really good performers over a long period of time. And if that works out, then the transfer fees that they've paid and the amortisation charges, because they're signing players on 7, 8 and 9 year contracts, will be fantastically beneficial. It is, however, a high-risk strategy. Now, if it's a high-risk strategy, should it be taking place? Well, it's Clearlake Capital's money. And I think it's fair to say the jury is out on quite a few of those signings to date. But they are in a problem, because if they sell the players, they're going to be booking far lower profits. Chelsea have been the most successful club historically over the life of the Premier League when it comes to player sales and player profits. And that has assisted the club, because it has a smaller capacity stadium than that of what it considers to be its rivals. And also the club was being subsidised to the tune of £900,000 a week by Roman Abramovich. So I think they've tried to do this cheat code, for want of a better phrase, from Matthew Hall. We will see whether it's successful or not this year, but perhaps in 2 or 3 years' time, when either they're having to sell the players and they can't book any decent profits, perhaps they have to take losses, or they've got players on long-term contracts who are on wages that nobody else is prepared to match, and therefore they are weighed down. They are effectively anchored by having 4 or 5 players on whatever it's going to be, 80, 90, 100 grand a week, who they can't shift, and they can't shift for 4 or 5 years.
Would it be fair to say, though, Kieran, that Chelsea have a get-out-of-jail-free card, in that just about every season they produce so many good young players themselves that just about every season they'd probably be able to sell one for 40 million quid, which is pure profit when it comes to staying within PSR rules?
Yes, they have been spectacularly successful. This is partially due to excellent recruitment as far as their academy is concerned. It's also partly due to the shortcomings of the elite player performance plan, which now allows clubs to recruit players from all over the country. And you can understand the attraction of going to a club of the stature of Chelsea if you're a young person. They've got plenty more on the production line. I had a meeting with somebody from a senior club, that's all I can say, who was involved in academy development. And they said the academy is now seen at the club as not necessarily being at a place to develop players for the first team, because at this level it's really difficult to do so. But we are now seen as a profit centre, i.e. the cost of the running academy have to be covered in far in excess of by the value of the player sales from the academy. And fans don't really recognise it because a lot of the sales that we're putting through are in the single millions. But if you sell 4 players for £4 or £5 million under the radar, because these players, they're going to Portugal, they're going to Spain, they're going to other places in Europe, and we've signed them for nothing, then we've done our job. But as far as the key performance indicators, as far as my salary and my bonus is concerned, I have targets which I've got to meet over normally we won't get hampered in one bad season, but you normally assessed over perhaps a rolling 3-year period. And it was fascinating to hear them talk about the challenges that they are under, because we're dealing with children. We are, I've used this phrase, and I'm not trying to be more hipster than anybody else here. I use this treat this phrase, the commoditization of children, by senior clubs in English football, as a means of assisting their financials.
We haven't got time to answer this question on this pod, Kieran, so maybe it's something we could look at later on. But that's horrifying to hear, but if an academy exists purely to justify its own existence financially, then why have an academy in the first place, if that's the only reason it's there?
Well, if you are making more money from player sales than the cost of running the academy, that's your contribution towards PSR each year.
Right, okay. It's horrible to hear. Anyway, Adam Roper is our last question. It's not so much a question, Kieran, as an existential plea for help, really. Adam Roper finds himself in a difficult situation here, and I feel for Adam. Adam says, on a recent pod, you were talking about how the lower leagues are so vital because the top of the pyramid is only sustainable if the base of the pyramid remains solid. As a fan of a lower league team, open brackets, Notts County, come on you sexy pies, exclamation mark, close brackets, not a phrase I was expecting to say. It's not entirely true, as I had read the scripture at least once. This is something that I instinctively agree with, but my brain plays terrible tricks on me at times, and it's got me wondering if this statement is actually no longer the case. There are general assumptions and vague statements that can be made to give credence to the argument, and I do believe that pressure from League One is good for the Championship, League Two is good for League One, etc. But with the gap between the Premier League and the Championship growing ever larger, is there anything financially quantifiable to back up the statement that the Premier League does need a strong pyramid or even a pyramid at all? Or have things now gone so far in one direction that it is in fact the pyramid that's only sustainable because of its peak? Now, we've had several people on recently, Kieran, in interviews who describe it as no longer a pyramid, but all sorts of, it's a rhomboid, it's a rectangle, but we all, I do feel for Adam, because we all, we love the idea of the pyramid, and when we're talking about regulators, it's one of the things we say we have to have the pyramid. But does Adam have a point? Is it a viable pyramid anymore? The Premier League, I think there are certainly club owners in the Premier League who would happily take the top of the pyramid away and put it in a different desert.
Well, I think we saw with the attempts of a domestic coup of English football under Project Picture, and also the attempts of the clubs behind Super League, was that they feel that they are now so successful, and because they've got the benefits of the elite player performance plan, the amazing commercial deals that they have, the amazing broadcasting deals that they have, that if Accrington Stanley didn't exist, if Morecambe didn't exist, if Grimsby Town didn't exist, it would not make one iota of difference to Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, the other Super League clubs and so on. So what we have is a historical, romantic attachment to the game. We've seen in recent years Luton Town go from non-league to the Premier League. Fantastic story. We've seen Leicester win the Premier League after being 2 years previously in the EFL Championship. Again, fantastic, romantic story. But when you talk to broadcasters, they say Leicester City winning the Premier League was a disaster because they had the lowest viewing figures, possibly, I think, this century. Because they won it early, and it wasn't attracting viewers because it wasn't the usual suspects. So I think trying to balance the notion that we have in this country and in some other countries, but if you look at third and fourth tier German, Spanish, Italian, French football, it's nothing compared to, you wouldn't get a club in the third tier of German football spending £15 million on a player. I can assure you of that, as we've seen with Birmingham City.
Yeah.
So I think what we have is a historical anachronism. It's an anachronism which, in my opinion, we should fight tooth and nail to preserve.
Yeah.
Because I love the fact that I know where Doncaster is, and I know where Darlington is, and I know where Hereford and Cheltenham are, because I've been to those grounds, because I've had days out, because I've had experiences, and so many other football fans have had similar experiences. I love the fact that you do have maverick owners who are running their own local business and they're subsidising the local football club, and you look to see what happened. The joy that Plymouth Argyle fans got from beating Liverpool in the FA Cup. And yes, we all know it wasn't Liverpool's full strength team, but there was still some pretty. You look at the cost of that team; they weren't. Yeah. So what has football brought to people, to individuals, to families, to generations? It's something which is intangible. It is something valuable, but it is something worth preserving. And therefore, I think for the greater good of the game, for the greater good of everybody who loves the game, it is something worth fighting for and preserving. But I can assure you, does Jim Ratcliffe, John Henry, Stan Kroenke, Joe Lewis, I know he doesn't own Spurs, but we know the truth. He used to. Do you think those people give a damn about lower league football? No, they don't.
Well, the thing is, two things, Kieran. You mentioned those bigger clubs not worrying if Grimsby and Darlington, Doncaster didn't exist. It's not that long away from when they're not worried about whether Palace, Brentford, Brighton exist either, really, because that's creeping towards that direction. But the thing is, those glorious intangibles that we talk about, when it comes to Romans, I don't think there are many football fans outside Blackburn who wouldn't love to see Preston in the FA Cup final. No disrespect to Villa fans, but obviously I'd love to see a Palace-Preston FA Cup final. Anything but a Palace-Brighton FA Cup final, obviously. But
I know we both agreed on that, aren't we?
But if Preston were to get, a club with that incredible history, if Preston were to get to the FA Cup final, I think most football fans would rejoice and would want them to win the FA, because that's where the intangible romance comes in, which you put so much more articulately than I did. Financially, economically, it doesn't make any sense, but in terms of morale and romance, it makes all sorts of sense, and sometimes romance trumps economics, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page, and everyone who's now joined the brand new Price of Football Club. If you'd like to join the club too and get ad-free listening and invite to our monthly Q&A sessions, bonus episodes and more, go to our website, priceoffootball.com. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, you can, of course, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And you can follow us on Twitter X and find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy one of our excellent books or even a Price of Football t-shirt, it's back. You can find all the details on our website, priceoffootball.com. I'm off up to Liverpool tomorrow to join Kieran at Liverpool University. I can't wait. Looking forward to it. Still don't know how we deal with letting the audience know the Liverpool score, Kieran. We'll have to discuss that one, perhaps with the audience before we start the game. Because there will be people in there who are going, "Don't tell me the score, mate." And there'll be other people going, "What's the score, mate?" Well, I won't do that Liverpool accent tomorrow, I promise. I will not do that terrible Scouse accent in case people go, "Oh, they've got Jimmy Tarbuck hosting this show." We'll be back. We'll be back on Thursday with our news pod. In the meantime, I'll hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Yes, and Kevin has highlighted we are doing a show at the University of Liverpool as part of University Enhancement. There are some tickets available. They were initially just made available to students and staff, and rightly so, as part of the university's commitment. But if you go to the university's website, I think there might be a handful of tickets still available. It's at the Yoko Ono Lennon Theatre, which is a fantastic auditorium, and we're looking forward to that. And we're also looking forward to coming to South Yorkshire on the 30th of April, and we will be putting in an appearance at Rotherham United Stadium. And again, looking forward to that. And we're in talks about getting a guest to come along. We don't know who as yet, but that will be progressing as we chat along.
Lovely. I look forward to it. I don't know why. Neil Redfern lives up that way. Let's go for Neil Redfern.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
A lot of people live up that way. We won't be short of guests. Don't worry. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.